was only a couple of weeks ago that Donald Trump was calling most of the media dishonest.
Do we like the media? Do we hate the media?
Yeah. But after he won Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, mostly by landslide margins, he softened his view of the press, at least for the moment.
I want to thank the media. The media's really covered me very fair for the last 2 hours. No, they've been really very fair over the last few weeks.
But a very different message from Ted Cruz as he was finishing third behind John Kasich in 4 of those 5 states.
Donald Trump is likely to win some states, and the media is going to have heart palpitations this evening. And the media is going to say, the race is over.
There was a ton of media attention when the Cruz and Kasich camps announced they would split up 3 states to give the other a better chance of derailing Trump, at least until reporters got to ask the candidates about the deal.
Directly tell your voters in Indiana to support Ted Cruz?
No, we're not. I'm not going to go tell anybody how to vote. But look, I mean, this is a matter of resources.
Is this collusion?
Is it collusion? No. What does that even mean?
How is it not collusion? What do you say to those people, though, who say that it's collusion, Senator? I just respectfully go at you at that again. Donald Trump is saying that you are colluding, and we expect to hear that from him again and again on the campaign trail.
Look, I understand that Donald will whine. That's what he does. Donald is a sore loser.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage of the race, Amy Holmes, a political commentator and former television anchor. Susan Faricio, chief congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. And Joe Trippi, a Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor. So, Amy, I had to adjust the volume on my set. Donald Trump saying something nice about the media. But let me play one more soundbite for you. And this is Joe Scarborough on MSNBC's Morning Joe talking about the pundits sort of coming around on Trump after that 5-state sweep. Let's take a look.
People have allowed, reporters have allowed, journalists have allowed their own biases and their own hatred against Donald Trump. Hate to sound like a broken record, but you keep doing it.
You agree with that?
I would agree that Donald Trump and the media are frenemies. I've used that phrase before. But look at what Campbell Brown had to write in Politico. I'm calling it Campbell's Lament. And if you're unhappy with Donald Trump being the front runner, she says blame TV and points to some really startling statistics that the New York Times reporting that Donald Trump has earned $2 billion in free media, that he gets 6 times the appearances.
He's gotten way more coverage, and maybe that's unfair.
Yes,
but some of that is Trump appearing on many, many television shows where some of his rivals wouldn't. But
it's also the media covering his campaign
rallies.
stops, rallies.
Yeah, I agree with that
part.
But
my point being this, that on the one hand, yes, that the media has been hostile towards Trump, but they've also given him a lot of free advertising.
I can't argue with that part. And by the way, there's a new NBC Wall Street Journal poll out today showing Trump with a 15-point lead in Indiana, which is supposedly a make-or-break state for Ted Cruz. There have been a lot of polls. Yeah. But when the press now says Trump is pretty close to unstoppable, do you think that's going too far?
No. I think the press was really excited about the prospect of a contested convention because we've never seen it. We go to these conventions, they're pretty boring. It's just a coronation.
Exactly.
But that's looking less and less likely now, just because the math is the math, and he is much more likely to become the nominee. Ted Cruz has almost no path there. And this big win where he got 60% of the vote, I think that's when you really saw the shift, where the media started to say, you know what, this probably is going to happen. And the chance of a contested convention is really shrinking down to unlikely just because Cruz has just deflated in these past 5 races.
Well, briefly, what about Scarborough's point that perhaps the media would have come to this consensus earlier, except that many were invested, either they don't like Trump personally or they were invested in this notion that he was a crazy outsider.
Yeah, I heard him say that. And, you know, when he says the media, who is he talking about? Is he talking about me? I'm just a reporter out there covering the races. Is he talking about the opinionators who are kind of woven into the media now and are part of the mix? Sure, there's definitely been a concerted effort to just be the sort of anti-Trump in the media, if you will. So there's some truth to what he's saying.
It's a very big media beast. And
right.
Joe Trippi, what do you think about Ted Cruz saying the media have heart palpitations, Trump's their chosen candidate, and then he has this sort of twist that that's because they're confident that he will lose to Hillary in the fall. Does he have a point, or is this what you say when you're trying to deflect attention from losing 6 straight contests?
I think it's what you say when you're losing 6 straight contests. I mean, the fact still is that Cruz, I mean, he picks Farina right now as VP. Why? To get attention. And that's what Trump has been doing. Trump gets attention because he says things that gets attention, and the press is going to cover that. We went through the whole place.
Art.
Where
it's a skill. I mean, when you ran campaigns, didn't you try to do things to get the press to cover you?
Sometimes it's a policy speech to try to get people to cover you. But you know, when Rubio tried to start saying outlandish things to get attention, it worked. He got a ton of attention. It just didn't get him any votes.
But I think Ted Cruz also, there's another strategy at work, and it's not just to deflect attention from his losses, but blaming the media, attacking the media is the red meat that the right loves. The media is the right's favorite, target.
Right.
It worked for Trump, because Trump's been blaming the media all along, so if Cruz gets on that bandwagon, maybe it can work for him.
Trump has always been in the strange position of being attacked by both liberal pundits and many conservative pundits. But now they have this whole other debate. Is Trump being presidential enough? So first he was going to be very presidential. Then when he called John Kasich's eating habits disgusting, people said, okay, he's being less presidential. But are they noticing that overall he has toned it down on Twitter? He is not going after journalists by name the way he used to. He's even sitting down for a primetime interview with Megyn Kelly. So I would say that he has toned it down, but he still likes to take his shots.
He's still Trump.
He's still Trump. He hasn't lost his inner Trump.
Yes, and he still talks. He said, talks about lying Ted and so forth. But the media is actually, once again, following sort of Donald Trump's cue when his own campaign advisor says Donald is now going to be more presidential. So now the media is on the lookout and on the watch to find evidence of this new presidential tone.
Here's what's fascinating, Joe. There was this Politico story that said that his new convention manager and senior advisor, Paul Manafort, was imposing a more disciplined campaign and where Trump would be more presidential. And then there was a story saying, there was tensions between him and the campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, who was part of the original team, and now Lewandowski's gotten more power back. My sources say, look, every campaign has tensions, but this is all overblown. As somebody who's been on the inside, when you've got different factions, particularly as the campaign expands, how does it feel to you?
Probably that there's two factions, and they're kind of trying to but in the end, Trump is going to be Donald Trump. I mean,
he's the chief strategist, right?
I don't think there really is a manager. Either one of them is in charge. I mean, I think they both have their lanes and and try to tug him in either direction. But in the end, you can't jump in front of the microphone. The candidate is the one that's out there, and Donald Trump is going to say what he wants to say.
Susan, there was a big story at the beginning of the week was that Ted Cruz and John Kasich and their team had reached this deal, this arrangement, this non-aggression pact. Cruz gets to campaign in Indiana without Kasich, and Kasich gets Oregon, and what was the other state? Washington, yeah. So the media kind of laughed that out of the room as being a ridiculous idea. Do you think that was warranted or borne out by
I don't know why they laughed it out of the room, because it's something that goes on in politics. It's just something that doesn't get exposed. They needed buy-in from the voters for this to work. That kind of behind-the-scenes scheming to try to defeat one candidate, I mean, it certainly happened in Mitt Romney's campaign and John McCain's campaign. All this behind-the-scenes stuff happens quite regularly.
But the problem is, as we showed, as soon as reporters got to ask the candidates about it, like, well, what deal? Well, John Kasich said, this isn't a very big deal at all, even though it had been advertised as being some kind of breakthrough.
And it has fallen apart, actually.
But there's been a lot of colluding going on in the past, and I mean,
You're shocked by that, aren't you?
Yeah.
You are shocked.
The only difference is none of the other campaigns that were colluding to stop a front runner in the past have actually put out press statements, and then we're appalled that the press was interested in their announcement about the colluding.
Amy, how would you describe, it was mentioned earlier that Cruz says that if he gets the nomination, he will have Carly Fiorina, his running mate. The media's reaction to that. The New York Times, in a news story, not an analysis, not on the op-ed page, said this was a desperate move. Maybe it was a desperate move, but I was surprised to see that in the news story. How would you describe the reaction to Carly?
It seemed to be pretty much overwhelmingly negative, that it was a Hail Mary pass, a desperate move, as the New York Times reported it, and I think disrespectful to Carly Fiorina and to the Ted Cruz campaign. They're in it to win it. Whether or not we think and can prognosticate if that will succeed, I think it should at least be covered fairly and neutrally.
Yeah, it had limited success, but it did. Look, Cruz had to do something. He needed to change the storyline from he keeps getting whipped by Donald Trump, and so the Kasich deal, the Carly arrangement, that she'd be the running mate. At least it got him some attention when he gave a speech introducing her. All the cable networks covered it live.
It covered him live right the day after he just got trounced in 5 primaries. So it was stealing it back from Trump, which is, of course, a Trump strategy that has worked in the past when he's not done well in the primaries. You know, Cruz is running out of these Hail Mary passes because the game's about to end, basically.
Well, when I was interviewing Carly Fiorina some months ago when she was a presidential candidate, this question, there had been all this sort of chatter about the VP slot. Let's take a look at what she said to me.
Exhibit A, how often have I been asked the question whether or not I'm running for vice president? My male counterparts in this race are not asked that question. So there's no doubt that women still are caricatured and characterized differently.
She viewed that as sexist, but I think there were a lot of candidates who the media decided are probably not going to go all the way, and maybe they're trying to be the number 2. What's your take?
Well, a lot of people thought that about Martin O'Malley. A lot of people are asking about Kasich as well. So I don't think, or Rubio early on was, you know, whether he was going to end up on the ticket. So I don't think it was sexist at all. I do think it looks kind of desperate for Cruz to do it when he did it. But the real play there was, frankly, to try to get women in the party who Trump has huge problems with, to try to get them in some way to, it was a Hail Mary, try to get them to come over.
Just briefly, Susan, there's a lot of mockery of Carly Fiorina singing a made-up song that she sang to Ted Cruz's daughters, but these are the same pundits who said she's too stern, she doesn't have a sense of humor, so it seems to me in some ways she can't win.
I question that whole singing business, but you're right. There is a double standard for her. Women, I think, if there's one woman in a big field of male candidates, they're going to get that kind of scrutiny, and I think that's probably because she's the only woman in the field.
I was thinking of breaking into song at this point, but I decided it's not the way to go. All right. You can email us, mediabuzz@foxnews.com, comments and questions about the media when we come back.